Turkey is gearing up for landmark elections on Sunday that could end President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's more than 2 decades in power. Opinion polls give his challenger, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, a narrow lead. DW's Aya Ibrahim spoke with voters on the streets of Istanbul.
Walking through the streets of Istanbul, you can't miss that this country is gearing up for an election, the most significant in its recent history. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan faces what is arguably the biggest challenge of his 20-year tenure. He could be unseated by this man, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. Whoever wins faces massive expectations from Turkish voters.
We live in a country where we do not feel good about the justice system.
The refugees, because we know that they are stuck in here. They're not going into Europe.
The earthquake response will be on my mind when I cast my vote. I also want the people I choose to be receptive to criticism, to listen to our criticism and not put us in jail for it. I'm dreaming of a country where everyone can express their ideas freely, where they can get an education, where they will not want to leave the country, where they will be happy to live in Turkey, where the economy is better, and where we as students have better lives and don't have to look at the prices of everything we buy.
We young people in Turkey do not have economic prosperity, and we don't get the education we deserve.
There are also concerns that in the case of a narrow difference in votes, President Erdogan may not accept defeat. His ruling AK party has previously challenged election results that did not go in its favor, claiming voting irregularities. With the stakes so high, there are fears that that scenario might play out again on May 14th. The people in this room are working day and night to avoid irregularities at the ballot box. They are election monitoring volunteers, receiving training from Oy ve Ötesi, an NGO dedicated to spreading democratic culture to all Turkish citizens, regardless of political affiliation.
When political polarization is on the rise, we think people need a legal basis to go back to and to discuss things in a peaceful way. That is how we act. That is what we teach.
Just this year alone, the NGO says it has trained around 100,000 volunteers to safeguard the integrity of Turkey's election. In total, over 500,000 volunteers are expected to monitor votes across the country, showing that despite disagreements over who should have the top job, the people of Turkey are united in their belief that change can come through the ballot box.
Let's bring in DW special correspondent Aya Ibrahim joining us in Istanbul. And of course, she also sent us that report. Aya, the people that you've spoken to are hoping for change. But President Erdogan still has huge support in Turkey, certainly around the country. Who are the people who support him in this election?
You're absolutely correct, Monica. I mean, the incumbent president, President Erdogan, still enjoys huge popularity. I mean, just looking at the turnout at some of his rallies, it's undeniable that there are a lot of people in Turkey that want to see him continue being in power. And, you know, even according to polls, any predicted win for his opponent is predicted with a very, very thin margin. But I would say that people across the board, whether it's Erdogan supporters or opposition supporters, want to see that change. The difference is that Erdogan supporters say, well, he is the man to deliver change. They look at his track record over 20 years and are able to see some progress, and that has to be said. And they say, well, you know, we do have an economic crisis, we do have inflation, but their argument is that Erdogan is the man for the job, where people that are, you know, likely to vote for the opponent tomorrow say, well, we just need different phrases, and that's how we're going to get change. So, you know, even Erdogan supporters will tell you things have to change in that country. There's just disagreements about who can bring that change to Turkey.
Right. And of course, today is the last day before the election. We could just hear quite clearly sort of helicopter sound as you were speaking to us. What is happening on this last election day?
So traditionally, before the polls open, campaigning tends to slow down a little bit. That's a tradition of democracy, to give citizens, the opportunity in these last couple of days to really think about their choice, because these are really two very, very different choices that they have to make tomorrow. With that being said, President Erdogan yesterday was on TV to give an interview. His interview was broadcast on over a dozen channels. That just gives you an idea about the kind of control that he has created for himself over media over the past 2 decades, whereas his opponent, his interview, Kılıçdaroğlu, his interview was broadcast on, I think, 1 channel. So even though campaigning has stopped, there's still, of course, a lot of anticipation about the results that will come out of tomorrow's election.
More than 64 million Turks are eligible to vote, but the outcome doesn't just affect them. It could also have serious implications for more than 3.5 million Syrian refugees living in Turkey who are not allowed to cast ballots. DW spoke to some Syrian refugees living in the Turkish city of Mersin. Many fear that for them, a change in power could spell disaster.
Under the scorching sun, Syrian Abdul Karim works 7 days a week on this construction site to earn a living and provide for his family back in Syria. During his lunch break, Abdul Karim follows news about Turkey's election, a vote that may decide his future, but which he has no say in. Abdul Karim has been living in Mersin for 8 years under temporary protection. He's worried about the election outcome.
I'm afraid of being deported because the opposition has threatened to deport Syrians if they come to power. My situation is miserable. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I am here and my family is far away. I haven't seen my own son yet. It's a rough situation to be in.
Many Syrians who fled their country's civil war live and work in Mersin. Many are in the same precarious situation as Abdul Karim. Almost all of them are worried about the election.
The opposition wins, things could get hard for us Syrians. In our shops and on the streets, racism would increase. Hopefully Erdogan will stay and nothing will happen to us.
Around 3.5 million Syrian refugees live in Turkey, most of them with only temporary guest status that can be revoked at any time and lead to deportation. President Erdogan's challenger Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu has promised to deport Syrian refugees within 2 years if he comes to power. Erdogan himself has called for what he termed voluntary repatriation of 500,000 Syrians. Their fate has become a political issue in Turkey's presidential election campaign.